Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of DC's Legends of Tomorrow. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, it's Bayrod's birthday, and obviously he's kind of hyped. I love the whole thing of him looking for like the totem, and it's like once again that shows like a little how irresponsible that you are. Like this you are a totem bearer, and you just kind of like it fell off and kind of got like underneath a chair or bed. I'm like, that's not the most responsible thing to do as a superhero. But it's because like he loosened it on his, because it was like, yeah, this is my gaming wrist, and him and Gideon were playing Mortal Kombat, so of course. But then obviously he's walking out, everyone's like, don't worry, no surprises, because sadly no one else remembered it was his birthday, which immediately I'm like, well, come on, it's a time, no one used the excuse of you're on the Wave Rider, you know, what is time when you're on a spaceship? So like that's also the thing too, but I guess it's like maybe specifically it's his birthday. Like how does, that's the thing, they didn't bother explaining to, like, how does that work on a Wave Rider? Are we going by like present day his birthday, like in a sense of whatever his birthday is present day, like say it's like November 5th. It's the first number that came to mind. Is it X's birthday? I'm surprised I didn't just use my own birthday as reference. That's kind of sad. But say his birthday is November 5th, and then like you know, is that by November 5th, 2044 or whatever? Or is that by like 2021, like it's November 5th? Like, I'm wondering how that works. Now I'm trying to get behind it. It's probably one of those things that, shut up, it doesn't matter. I don't know. That's actually interesting. But like I said, you're on a time ship. Like, time. What is time when you're on, you know, so like, especially when you're kind of sitting in the middle of time like they do sometimes in a Wave Rider. So it's like, regardless. So I won't blame them too much on that part. But for him being so excited, because it's like, yeah, they're alien hunting, and it's like, wait, you guys, this whole thing was made up lies so that you could get me here at my favorite sitcom on my birthday. And then Zari's like, oh no, like, yeah, bro, this is totally what this is about. And so basically, this sitcom is so important to Bayrod because it basically made him who he is today, you know? And I think that's a really powerful element of this episode. Like, I mean, we all have those things that, like, influenced us at such a young age. And I think that a lot of interesting things were kind of pointed out in this particular episode. I mean, first and foremost, I think you got a real insight into like a lot of the behind the scenes, like why choices are made in certain shows. I'm like, oh, what's going to be the most popular thing? This test audience showed that this was kind of the popular thing. And oh, the business side of things are right. This is going to keep our show popular instead of it being the niche thing that it is. We're going to go big. This is going to be a hit. Like, you know, you can see like the behind scenes aspect of that. But also, I think it was an important aspect of Bayrod's story, because for him, it's like, right, seeing someone like Imran on screen, you know, he's even saying like, oh yeah, like he's like my favorite actor and everything. And so for him, it was a situation of seeing someone on television that kind of made it okay to be himself, you know, because his parents had expectations of who they wanted him to be. And then he's like, yeah, but everyone else just saw like a weird Muslim kid that never really, they couldn't take the time to really understand. So for him, the show taught him how to, you mean, because even just immediately watching the episode, you're like, oh, like, well, them filming that episode at the beginning, you're like, oh, of course, you can definitely see where a lot of who Bayrod is reflected from this particular sitcom. But also, you know, and I think that's also like I think that's also another message of this episode of like why it is important for people to see themselves on screen, whether it's movie or TV show. It's just because it's like, right, like you can see like, whoa, that can be me. I don't have to just be pigeonholed to like what anyone, like I can be anything I want. I can be whoever I decide to be. I don't have to be what other people want me to be, you know? And obviously, I think that's been an important conversation for both Zari and Bayrod. Like, obviously, there's been conversations about their family situation beforehand and stuff like that. You know, obviously, Zari's gotten to the point, I think, she's a little bit better with her family than she used to be. I mean, aside from, like, you know, both, you know, 1.0 as well as 2.0 on, like, their family dynamics and stuff like that. But, you know, because it is also interesting to see who Bayrod is without the show being what it was. Even though it was like cut short, 2 seasons, it was a cult. It had a cult following, which there are plenty of shows I like that kind of fall in that same category. But that who he is. Obviously, I love too that Astra initially was just kind of like, because she's the one that's the more like you could with this alien and stuff like that. Yeah, it's all, she's like, yeah, it's all about like mass hit appeal and stuff like that. For Bayrod, it's like, no, it's not like that. But then like the moment Bayrod started changing a little bit, she's like, whoa, I'm kind of liking this side of you. It's just like, that's actually, it's like there's actually a lot more between her and Bayrod than she would ever really admit. Because it's just, for her, it's a conversation about kind of like, I guess it's kind of like, oh, this is kind of like a show for losers. It's kind of what and Astra in her mind is like, I'm all about winners. But then like who Bayrod became was, because I don't think she realized it until the Bayrod that she'd gotten used to started disappearing, that she's like, oh, I actually like you better because now you're like, ugh, you're some douchebag now, so... But it wasn't just, Bayrod. I mean, like because even that became a conversation where it's like, no, now because this cute, adorable alien, which I love that conversation where Bayrod figured it's like, right, so this is actually, this whole thing was a lie. But, a little tropey, but I guess it's sitcom mission time, essentially. And I'm like, yeah, the last time you were on a sitcom-related mission was season 5 with the whole Sisters of Fate, when everyone's on TV shows and stuff like that, when the Legends were on TV shows. I also thought it was kind of interesting. Maybe they can't mention it, but it's like, right, like alien sitcom. I'm like, I'm surprised no Alf references were made. Maybe there might have been that I didn't catch. I don't think there were any. But also some of those movie posters really quickly. There was one called Tornado. I was like, is that supposed to be Twister? Oh, what was the other one? There was like one called 5 Roommates. At first I was like, is that supposed to be like Friends? I don't think it is. It might be a reference to something else. There's that sitcom that Ryan Reynolds was a part of that was like short-lived, that's kind of got that cult following status. Like Freaks and Geeks kind of has that as well. But I think, what was it, Mad About You? I think that's the sitcom I'm thinking of, not unless I'm confusing that with a different one. I think that series kind of has a little bit of a cult following. I don't know if what that's supposed to be a reference to, like 5 Roommates. Like I said, I'm assuming it was supposed to be Friends-esque, but maybe it's referencing something else. But regardless, the interesting thing too is that we found out, like, obviously Zari 1.0 remembered Bayrod's birthday, which made Zari 2.0 kind of feel bad, But and they talk about it a little bit later on, but I immediately was like, nah, it's understandable why she would remember more than anyone else, because she came from a time where, like, her brother wasn't alive to enjoy Eli's birthday. So for her, his birthday's important because it's like, right, my brother's alive. Everything, everything's the way it should be in that regard. So, for her, that's why. But it's a thing where, like, Zari 2.0, I think for her, it's a situation where she kind of, when you have memories of growing up with your brother, you kind of, you take family for granted a lot of times. It's because it's like, because she even says later on, she didn't realize how important this show was for one, it was her brother's favorite show. She's like, I didn't even notice about him. Also, I didn't realize how much this show influenced. She knew, like, he watched it a lot and stuff like that, but she didn't realize, like, how it was such a core foundation to who he is as a person. And, like, obviously this show changing how much of an impact it, like, Nate even tried to be like, no, it's okay, like, none of us really knew. Because obviously Sarah's the one that's like, no, we need to get this back on track because we have no idea what, like, the, like, changes could do, and the slight changes could have the biggest ramifications. I mean, she's like, the timeline changes and how we lost Zari 1.0, and Zari 2.0 kind of looks down, like, which I thought, like, was kind of sad in that moment. Like, I don't know whether she was just reading something on the screen, but they made sure to show you her kind of looking down after that statement was said. I guess that was just mainly them kind of looking at the scripts and stuff like that. But I'm thinking it was just also like, right, that's still kind of that awkward conversation of like, right, I wasn't the Zari that this team got to know. I mean, technically I was. I'm the Zari this team got to know, this version of the team. But what about, I mean, the 1.0 is the ones that was with them the entire time, from like obviously season 3 to the end of season 4. So it's like, it's complicated in that regard. And I think that's always going to be something that's kind of hanging over her. And I think that's always, I think that's going to mess with her a lot. Just like, knowing like, right, especially because it's like, right, there's the whole her and Nate thing. Because it's like, right, like, I got to get back your Zari, because Behrad changing has other implications as well. Because, like, he even said it, it's like, if it wasn't for this show, like, he had gone to talk to Imran. It's like, yeah, it's important. Don't sell out, be you, because you allowed me to be myself, that it was okay to be myself. And so he ended up, he stole the totem and ended up going on this wild adventure, the biggest adventure of his life. And he loves the life that he lives now. And it's like, we see how much that all changed and how much of him was disappearing as he was changing. But Zari 2.0 was like, no, I'm going to save you, bro. I'm going to make sure, I'm going to fix everything, Obviously, there was a whole thing about Nate. I love, like, Zari 2.0 tried out for the nosy neighbor, and, like, Gary was, like, putting his hand up, but she's like, I'm the one that's an actual trained actor, but she didn't get the role, but Nate did, which I love Nate's little thing of, like, yeah, Nate Haywood, I don't need to lie about my height, I'm 6'2". I'm like, oh, you still had to do it. I think that's just the male thing. And it's like, he's like, yeah, I live here and there, I travel a lot because of work. He's like, wait, is this for the CW? And I'm like, shut up, I love it. I love that you guys do stuff like that all the time. I love it. I love it. I love it so much. I also love that there was a quote-unquote car chase between Imran and Astra. I love that. Just like on, like, not like those are the most speedy vehicles, but they're doing that through, like, and ended up crashing the taping of the show and everything. I'm glad everything kind of worked out at the end, because Zari had visited Imran's brother to talk about right, like, she was coming almost from the perspective of her situation with Behrad, of kind of like, you don't want, like, if you guys don't mend things now, like, you never know, like, what this can mean for your relationship. Like, this could be, like, what breaks you guys apart, because you're kind of a solid team now, like, But yeah, once again, it's like the show did get canceled after 2 seasons, but it's still, it's a situation of, like, they'd rather be, it's more important for us to make one person laugh, because this show, as it is, it's life-changing, And because this is like, right, we don't want to find out what this team will be like without Behrad, It's like, because if Behrad never became who he did, like, who knows what that, Because once again, you'd assume a lot of the Zari storylines from season 3 and 4, you just put Behrad there instead of her, because once again, we still don't know the full implications of just, like, how different a lot of the scenes in the previous seasons would have been with Behrad, and how storylines would have played out. Especially because we do know, like, oh, there was a Behrad and Charlie thing that was kind of like an on and off thing that was happening. It came up in season 5, but that probably happened throughout season 4 as well, maybe, or maybe just in between the seasons, regardless. So there's that whole angle to things. So, having a totem bearer on the team and everything has been a part of this squad for a while, and it's like Behrad, slash Zari, like, helped save the team on multiple occasions. So it's like, if they probably wouldn't be alive at all if who knows what the team would look like without Behrad, and the implications run deep in that regard, is all I'm trying to say. So, and obviously, like, I love Nate coming on to, like, at first I was like, when he first came into the scene, like, when they were filming, I was like, is he doing this because he's trying to wreck the show a little bit? Because he's like, oh, I'm not the nosy neighbor, I'm the alien hunter or whatever. I'm like, I guess it's just kind of like, right, because he's trying, I guess the whole point was to try and mess up things so the show could go back to the way it was. And but obviously the baby Gus ended up latching onto him, which I'm like, I love even Astra being like, oh, Gus, did you just come up with, like, a merchandisable name? And it's like, yeah. And the whole thing that Gary says is, like, basically it suckles to the person it latches onto because the teat is on the side, and it's like Sarah, like, oh, no, don't say the word teat. So But once again, I do like that everything ultimately ended up working out, and obviously we do get Bayrod back at the end. It's a celebration. It's, you know, everyone celebrating his birthday, and I'm like, oh, that's so dope. And then Zari 2.0 token with 1.0, and it's like, right, as long, you know, obviously we're living in an unprecedented time because there's never been two, like the totem is split between Zari and Bayrod, so it's like, right, if at least one of us has our totem at a time, like, it should be okay, like, for you, you know, so let's test it out for a week. So I was actually surprised to see, like, Zari 1.0 and 2.0 switch, like, so that's definitely going to be interesting. I thought they were going to, like, once again, I might be remembering it wrong at, during DC Fandom, because I remember them talking about it a little bit, about the whole two Zaris thing, but I thought they said they were trying to avoid doing that, but maybe it was like, they wrote it the way they did so they wouldn't have both Zaris. I forgot the reasoning for it because they talked about it at DC Fandom why they didn't do the whole two Zari things, why they kind of wrote it back a little bit in the sense of having them both out and about. But now I guess like this is a better option for them. It's like, right, like we switched them back and forth type of situation, which I think that's so dope too, because it's like, right, you get to play like two different characters, two different, very different versions of the character. Obviously, like, Zari 1.0 is very much like Bayrod 2.0. They couldn't be further apart, you know, and everything. But obviously, that's also that awkward thing, too, of like, oh, yeah, like, I'm stupid. Maybe they talked about it in season 5 because I don't remember. How does that whole thing work? Because it's like, right, because that was a whole conversation like, oh, Nate and the other Zari are probably in the totems banging. Don't you think it's kind of weird? And even Sarah being like, yo, did you guys? And it's like, yeah. I'm like, but come on. It's like how does that, they're two separate beings. I don't think they share the same body. I'm pretty sure that's not how that works. I mean, because they had two different occupied bodies, so it's not the same thing. Because I was about to say, it'd be weird if like Zari 1.0 is kind of driving and it's like you guys kind of bang it out, but then there's like 2.0 and Constantine or a thing. But I'm like, no, they're two separate bodies. They're two separate people, legitimately two separate people. Paradoxing anomaly and stuff like that. But it's still gotta be weird to be like, oh, here's Nate and Zari 1.0. It's like, oh, but where's John's Zari? You know, that's going to be a whole... once again, it's going to legitimately come down to being a whole scheduling thing. So that's the interesting side of everything. But at the same time, there's also the whole thing with Lita getting in contact with Rory, and he gets her on the ship, and it turns out she's pregnant, which he's getting pissed at her about, and she's like, really? What did you and Mom do? And it's like, he's like, conceived? Because it was conceived you, essentially, and instead of being like, yeah, you guys kind of randomly hooked up, and you randomly find out, like, wait, I have a daughter? Which it is a complicated bit, because she's like, I haven't heard from you in a year. I mean, I guess it's like, well, because didn't Mick bring it up earlier in the season that she was kind of avoiding him? Because it's like, right, she's off at college and stuff like that. So I think some of those conversations that came up, but I think that was about all we really heard on the Lita thing. But it's like, right, I haven't heard from you in like a year. It's like, oh, because he technically time jumped to 2023 because of this mission and everything. Obviously he wasn't the greatest at kind of accepting it, but he eventually, you know, they kind of buried a hatchet because he realized it's like, right, I'm kind of a stubborn, you know, it's gonna take a while. Like he used the metaphor of kind of like the top of like a jar or whatever. Because we found out, like, obviously a lot of things have changed for Lita, like she's kind of left her Sabbath days behind her. Now she's more of a Fiona Apple fan, and everything. So her boyfriend Nico, and it's like, right, Dad asked me all this information. Man, he wants to know so much about Nico's scheduling and stuff like that, even down to the hour. And then Sarah's like, oh, because she figured it out. It's like, no, I'm legitimately an assassin, and what Mick did is like, if you want to find your target and kill them efficiently, you know where they are. It's like, Mick is going to try and kill your boyfriend, Lita, and they go track him down. It's like, wait, is Mick choking him? And it's like, wait, are they hugging? And it turns out Mick is like, oh, like Mick and Nico had a like heart to heart and everything. It's like, whoa, what's going on here? And even to the point, like, obviously it gets dropped about Kayla, and it's like, Gary's like, wait, you and Kayla? And it's like, yes, you know. And then Sarah being like, you know, and then I love Miko being like, rest in peace, Kayla. And then, because before that, Mick had started crying. Sarah's like, are you crying? Because, like, she's, in all the time we've known Mick from the Flash till now, he's never been the most, I mean, he buries his emotions. He's hurt when he's hurt, but he won't always show it. But to see him literally break down and cry like that, it's like, wait, what? And Gary immediately, because he was asking a lot of questions, so I was like, oh, so there's implications for, like, Kayla and everything, especially later on when he was like, oh yeah, like, so there was tentacles involved, and it's like, whoa, Dad, you dated an alien? It's like, no, we didn't date, we just kind of, he's just like, ew, gross, Dad, I don't want to know that, just about them just, like, hooking up like that. But it was really sweet for him. It's like, no, like, you know, he's like, she's like, oh, Dad, I thought you came here to kill him. And he's like, I did. She's like, Dad. And he's like, that's a whole thing, a bit within itself. I love it. Just like, I think that's probably what they did. They kind of wrote the rest of the episode, like, obviously this episode centered around a sitcom. They kind of treated it with some of the other elements too. I mean, to be fair, like, Legends is kind of a sitcom in its own right. It can be dramatic. It's funny and wacky, and just, once again, it and Doom Patrol are the weirdest DC shows. Like, I think across the board, I don't know. I'd say at least live action wise, because I say animated wise, probably the weirdest one is probably Teen Titans Go. It's probably, like, just, I haven't seen every episode, but just like the nature of that show, it gets pretty weird and, like, bonkers. So, like, but, like, probably live action wise, this and Doom Patrol are probably the weirdest shows. And I say that with all the love in the world, because they're so amazing, because they're so weird. But regardless, circling back to what I was saying, but the fact is that it's like, no, like, I want my grandchild to grow up with two loving parents, have what I never had, you know? So that was sweet. But then we ultimately, you know, Zari's being like, Zari 1.0 being like, oh yeah, literally nothing's, like, glad to see, like, nothing's changed, like, Avalanche is engaged, Gary's an alien, which is kind of not a surprise. Well, it was an alien the entire time. It's kind of not a surprise. And then, you know, Mick, I'm glad you haven't changed at all. It's like, right. So apparently when Kayla put her tentacle in his ear canal, she impregnated him. So that's why he's been the way he has been recently in this episode. It's because he's basically, his hormones are all over the place. That's why he's been acting the way he is, because he's pregnant. So I'm like, oh, so Rory's the male seahorse in this situation, which that's the example I always go to, because that's the only species I'm aware of that does that. I'm not saying they are the only ones, but it's the only one I'm aware of, because I remember hearing that once, and I've always latched onto that information, that male seahorses are the ones that give birth. Once again, that could be BS that I heard that one time that have just kind of warped in my head to be reality, because I've never looked into it, but I think that's a real thing. I could be wrong. So it's like, oh, cool. And I love Zara being like, wow, I really didn't see that coming. And then Gideon has a laugh track, and it's like, Gideon, and she's like, sorry, that's the way I'm programmed to laugh. I love it. So I am very, very interested to see where all of this takes us. I'm especially with everything related to Mick. That's going to be interesting this season. Once again, when it comes up, I'll talk about it. But anyone that's kept up with any news of the show probably already knows what it is, but I'd rather not talk about it until it kind of happens. So, but I'm curious to see what happens with Mick's story this season, and is Kayla actually dead? Like, maybe it's going to eventually turn into a rescue mission, because it's like, right, God, that's going to be weird, because it's like, right, you have a child who's now now about to be a parent, and you're about to be a parent again, but the mom is out of the situation in this regard. Also makes you wonder, I was about to say, if that's the case, like, well, maybe that, because I was about to say in Gary's species, maybe that's how so, like, would Gary be the one to get it in the ear canal and end up having the babies, or can both species do that? Like, I mean, both of the, like, sexes in their species do that, so could Gary do that same thing too? No, it brings up a lot of questions. But I am really interested to ultimately see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good